Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome to the Keiser Report. You know, the president of the Boston Fed, Eric Rosengren, said that until morale improves, low rates and bond buying will continue. Yes, the beatings will continue until morale improves. So listen up, you smelly consumer peasants and rotting debt grunts. Because the Fed will continue to beat you to a bloody, impoverished pulp until you smile. Smile like we're all Walmart greeters had they not been fired last year. And spend, spend, spend like every man's mortgage debt is his castle. Smile and spend, smile and spend. Repetitious like a Japanese sex bot. Or the abuse and capital destruction will continue. You understand what I'm saying here? The Boston Fed is saying that they're going to continue the financial beatings until morale improves. This is very Pol Pot-like, very dictatorial-like, Stacy Herbert. What's going on here?
Well, the saying is the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's often commanders in the military who say that to their abused soldiers. And you see this in with the central banks, is that they're command and control, they're authoritarian, they're demanding that it's you, the grunts, that got it wrong. We're doing the right thing. You're the ones you need your morale improved. Now, Eric Rosengren of the Boston Fed told the Boston Business Journal that the Fed is prepared to keep these low rates and bond buying for what may seem like a long time. Now, of course, beatings often feel like they're going on for longer than they actually did.
Yeah, well, look, they are saying that the low rates and bond buying, or quantitative easing, will continue until employment picks up. But this is really not the point at all for their bond buying and quantitative easing. The point is to jack up asset prices for their friends in these speculative bubbles in real estate and in the stock market. Employment numbers are crashing because of quantitative easing, because of bond buying. So this is remarkable because just like some frickin' dictator out in the go-go land of Nowheresville will beat the prisoners and say, morale has got to improve. We're going to beat you to a bloody pulp until you improve morale. Or, look at Mubarak over in Egypt, the former dictator. That was one of the things he was saying all the time, is we're going to beat all you Egyptians until morale improves. Now you've got these central bankers who are the dictators of our time saying, we're going to beat you to a bloody pulp with quantitative easing and asset purchases until your morale improves, you freaking consumer indebted moron!
Well, so, the drill sergeant abusing the grunt, okay? They often don't realize while they're abusing them that it is the abuse that is causing the low morale. And is the Fed's low rates and bond buying the thing causing the low morale, the deflation that they seek to stop?
Yes, yes, the answer is yes. I think you put it succinctly. Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, well, this headline suggests I am right as well. Because of the Fed, mortgage market liquidity is as bad as when Bear Stearns failed. And this is from Guy Hasselman of Scotiabank. And Zero Hedge quotes him as saying, through its QE policy, the Fed buys $3 of mortgages for every dollar of origination. The consequence is that secondary mortgage market liquidity has been decimated. It is as bad as when Bear Stearns failed. So Zero Hedge refers to it as collateral extraction. They're extracting collateral from the system, and therefore liquidity is drying up.
Right, or another way to look at it is zombification and debt transfusions. Here you've got zombie banks who should have been allowed to fail and die, but instead they're being transfused with debt. So as the statistic points out, 3 times more debt transfusion is required per 1 unit or dollar of debt origination in this hugely deflationary contraction of the real economy in favor of the virtual foo-foo economy, where everyone is just putting assets up their schwing and calling that a net worth enema, as if that somehow is going to be the basis for a growing economy. I don't think so, unless you want to start monetizing bulimia. then you've got a bulimic-based economy where people are vomiting their net worth and saying, look, the more vomit, the better. Look at all the vomit on the street from all these poor suckers that can't afford real food anymore. The economy must be expanding.
Well, those are just the mortgage-backed securities, as Zero Hedge points out. However, since the Fed has refused and refuses to taper, the same liquidity collapse is coming to treasuries first, then corporates, then ETFs, then REITs, and everything else that the Fed will eventually monetize, just like the BOJ. So more deflation, more liquidity traps, no velocity of money, kaput!
All right, no, I think that's a good point, is there's no velocity of money. You can't have any real economic growth or a viable economy unless money is circulating. Again, the zombie example or metaphor, the zombies they don't have, or Dick Cheney, for example. Dick Cheney, he had his heart replaced with a kind of a pump, and instead of a heartbeat, it's just a low buzz, like, nah, and where he goes, shoots people in the face with a shotgun occasionally. Yeah. But that's the economy. Dick Cheney's technically a dead man, but he's kept artificially alive by this pump that's pumping blood, or a surrogate of blood, probably maple syrup and some kind of concoction made out of, dead mortgage brokers. And then you've got this situation where in the mortgage market, they're being kept alive similarly with the artificial pump of quantitative easing, keeping the zombie alive. The zombie apocalypse is upon us. And that's why things like Bitcoin are hitting new all-time highs all the time, because that's one of the only hard money substitutes for it's a zombie killer, effectively.
Well, the Fed promises to continue the velocity beatings until morale improves. Here in the UK, they've brought over Mark Carney to start beating the population here. And we're going to turn to this tweet from Ian Fraser. Carney's unhappy legacy, Canada's household debt as percentage of GDP growth, #1 in world in 2006 to 2013. He links to this chart from The Economist, and you see this is debt as a percentage of GDP. Canada is at the top. That's showing that it has the fastest growing debt from 2006 to 2013. China is the next fastest growth, but their debt to GDP is only 32% compared to Canada's 92%. Ireland's 106%, and the UK 93%. But you see how fast what he was doing was increasing the debt at a very high velocity, and now they want it for here.
Right, he's a careerist. He's a central banker who accelerated the debt to further his career, even though he's left Canada in a huge indebted state that can only end in tears. Now, his background, of course, he was a hockey player, a goalie in an Ivy League school, and I played hockey myself. And if you know goalies who play hockey, they're always asking people to throw things at them because they're trying to practice being a goalie. And they always say, here's a bucket of pucks. Throw them at my head as fast as you can. So again, Mark Carney is a perfect central banker. He's a guy who likes to have things thrown at his head.
Well, he's here to improve the morale, and he did a good job in Canada. The morale being the more debt you were willing to take on in Canada, it's 92% of debt to GDP. 93% here in the UK. I guess they want to accelerate it even further, perhaps to as high as Ireland. So we're going to look at some of the people here in the UK that might need a beating. Here from the #MillionMask March, you see there, those young guys are carrying a Max Keiser Bankster Hunter poster. And if you zoom in on the photo, there is Max Keiser looking like somebody who needs his morale improved. That was pretty scary.
Well, of course, all over the world, people understand that the bankers must be euthanized in some way. Gold, silver, and Bitcoin are to the banksters what crucifixes and garlic are to vampires. You know, you show them a little Bitcoin and they shrivel. They shrivel like the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz. They just shrivel into a puddle of their own and tears. Show them the Bitcoin. Be free of their tyranny. Be free of their beatings.
Well, Bitcoin hit $300 only this morning, so that's looking pretty good. Now, Guy Fawkes protests in central London on bonfire night. Many demonstrators staged a bonfire night burning of energy bills to voice their opposition to rising costs of fuel.
Yeah, burning your energy bill is like, burning your draft card. You know, during the Vietnam War, they burned their their draft cards. Burning your energy bill is similar in that you don't want to join up forces with the corrupt, the big 6 energy companies in the UK that are financial terrorism. So if you don't want to support financial terrorism of the big 6 energy companies here in the UK, you would burn your energy bill. I suggest get 1,000 people on the Millennium Bridge here in London to get together and burn their energy bill in unison.
And finally, here's one story that is pretty shocking from the UK regarding what they plan to not even have to do any more beatings in the future, and that is target the children. The tweet is from Telegraph News, and it says payday lenders target children's TV to, quote, groom the next generation of borrowers, at Martin S. Lewis has said. And this is apparently the Wonga ads are being targeted at daytime children's television, and the characters are cartoon characters taking out Wonga loans.
Right, well, you know, this is a page taken from the cigarette industry. They used to target kids. You know, Joe Camel was a cartoon character expressly designed to attract children, because once you get hooked up on nicotine before a certain development stage of the brain, you become addicted for life. So Wonga, similarly, they know that if they get a child into debt immediately, they have a child in debt for life. It's kind of an indentured servitude model to get a kid in debt and keep them in debt for their entire life. That's Wonga the slave. And they should change their whole cartoon advertising from those cute little stuffed sock puppets to maybe that old Negro spiritual, jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Because that's what they want these consumers to be. They want to be on the cotton picking plantations of Wonga and working for to pay off their Wonga debt. That's what they all want. Wonga, Wonga, Wonga. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. I work for Wonga and I'm a slave master. I'm a slave master. I like my people to work like slaves because I have no respect for them. I've got contempt for humanity. My name is Wonga. I got contempt for humanity. I hate you. I hate your kids. I want your fetuses in debt. That's my name is Wonga. Get your fetus in debt. They'll abort themselves to get out of debt. Wonga, Wonga, Wonga. I hate you. All right, Stacy, we gotta go. We gotta go.
See you later, Max.
Stay tuned for more, a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Zac Goldsmith, author, environmentalist, and a member of Parliament for Richmond Park. Zac, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Good to see you.
All right, you've got a campaign that you are right in the middle of called Recall. The goal, I think, is to get 20,000 signatures, but tell us about Recall.
Recall basically means that people can get rid of their MP at any time. At the moment, you have an election every 5 years. In between those elections, there is absolutely nothing you can do to hold your MP to account. So as an MP, I could tell you right now, I'm switching to an extremist party. I'm going to go on holiday for 2 years. I'm going to boycott Parliament. I'm not going to see any of my constituents. I could do any of those things, and there's nothing my constituents could do about it. It is the only job you can't get fired from in this country, other than, unless you're the Queen or a vicar. In fact, I think even vicars can be fired now. And this is important because people feel marginalized. They feel that politics has become so remote, so abstract now that it means nothing. They don't have a piece of the action. Okay,
so you've got politicians. They are basically career politicians. Yeah. They end up there for many, many years, and they lose touch with their constituency, and the Parliament is losing touch. And I think the popularity of Parliament, like Congress in America, is hitting lows, decade-long lows, and this will maybe change that.
Yeah, because people feel that there's almost no point voting now. You've got if you have a safe seat with 25,000 majority, it doesn't matter what you do during the 5 years, that place is always going to vote for your party, or they may not vote at all. But you're going to get in. You're always going to get in. What Recall does is it means that if people in a conservative area, people that would never vote Labour, if enough of them sign a petition, usually 20%, and that earns the right to have a referendum, they can then chuck out their MP, select someone else from the same party, and keep going. So places will always be safe for some parties in some parts of the country, but no MP would be safe. It would keep MPs on their toes at all times. And I think that would be good for a lot of reasons, but principally because it would mean we'd have more independent-minded people in the backbenches of Parliament. I'm a backbencher. My only job is to hold the government to account on behalf of my constituents. But if there's no pressure from my constituents, there's no threat from my constituents, then the pressure is all from my party. And I'm more likely to be obedient and just toe the party line and do what I'm told. And if I want to get promotion, then the very last thing I do is hold the government to account because I depend on the government for promotion. So you need to balance that power that the government and the parties have with the power that you give to local voters.
Okay,
you have to empower voters, otherwise you don't have a functioning democracy.
Is this a good lever to make these types of changes? Now, you mentioned that people are thinking, is it even worth voting anymore these days? And of course, immediately you have to think about Russell Brand, who's a British star who was on Newsnight recently and making the same point. Don't even vote. He doesn't vote. Apparently, Jeremy Paxman, who's the host of BBC One's Newsnight, he said he doesn't vote. But there was very little in terms of solutions. They had this discussion. They said that the situation is messed up. I think Russell was kind of putting forward a redistribution policy of wealth. I'm not sure that's the way to go. But is this a lever? I mean, you're in Parliament. You're in Parliament. Here's a lever. Is this have the leverage needed?
It's one of the things you need to do. Look, you've got a choice. A lot of people agree that democracy is not working as well as it should in this country. I don't think there's any argument about that. So you've got a choice. You either walk away from democracy, and I think logically that means walking into a very, very dark place. So I was really depressed by that Russell Brand and Jeremy Paxman discussion.
Why?
Because I think boycotting democracy is guaranteed to take you away from democracy. I think democracy is the best system we have. Our system today is a flawed democracy. The job, therefore, is to improve it, to make it into a purer democracy, empower people, let them get rid of dodgy MPs. Instead of grumbling all the time, my MP's hopeless, or they're all the same, they've all got their snouts in the trough, give them the power to get rid of their MPs. Then they have the MP they deserve. And if they've got the wrong MP, they've got no one to blame but themselves. Give people the power to start referendums, local, regional, national, so that if they don't like what the government's doing, they can take power into their own hands. Pure democracy is the answer. To walk away from democracy, I think, is really frightening. Because there is not a single example in the world of people walking away from a proper democracy into a better world. It's not. I can't think of a single example. It's depressing and it's frightening. It should frighten all of us.
Let's talk about the media in this country for a second, because just this week we had the Million Mask March, which was replicated all over the world. Thousands of people on the street. It wasn't on the BBC's, which is the main media outlet in this country. It wasn't on their main story for their main network. It wasn't even on their local London news. It wasn't covered at all. And yet here you had, obviously, it reminded me, really lead up to the Iraq War. There were 2 million Brits out in the street protesting that war, and they were basically given short shift as really not having anything important to say. So what about the media? My question is the media, and principally the top media outlet, BBC, is a state-run media outlet. I mean, this is their #1 platform. Is that an issue in terms of getting the story out to people in a way? It seems that they just don't get the story. What's wrong with the BBC? That's my question.
What's wrong with the BBC? I mean, the trouble is, I don't want to fall into a trap. There are a lot of people on the right of my party who've been going for the BBC for a long time because they think it's got a left-wing bias. I still think, despite some of the problems, I still think it is one of the few institutions in our country that we can be a little bit proud of. You know, everything else is falling down around us. So I wouldn't want to undermine the BBC. I'd like to see it grow some balls. Is that probably not an appropriate thing to say?
I think bollocks is in the country.
I'd like to see it, you know, be a little bit more edgy, a little bit tougher. I think in terms of the other media, the sort of the private media, I suppose, I'm concerned by amalgamation of power in too few hands, whether it's media, whether it's the energy companies, whether it's the banks, whatever. When things get too big, they get too powerful, democracy suffers. So I think there is an issue there. It's something which occasionally is raised in Parliament. The hacking inquiry, I suppose, triggered a little bit of discussion about that, but really that was all about behavior of individual journalists as opposed to the ownership structures, which I think you can't get away from. You know, we're obsessing at the moment about energy, and we've just allowed the energy companies to say it's all about green taxes. So what happens? Our politicians all talk about green taxes. It isn't all about green taxes.
All right, let me cut in there for a second.
We need to take the structures on.
Let's segue into energy conversation now for a second, because obviously this is big news. You got 6 big energy players in the UK. The opposition in Parliament, Ed Miliband, is saying that they are operating really as a cartel. And folks are obviously see their energy prices rising. There's a huge issue there. In this energy concentration of pricing power, it seems like these big 6 energy companies are really operating in in a competition-free environment, and now many folks are asking, should they be nationalized again? Do we need to go back there? You're in the opposite. You're in the Conservative Party. What's the thought there?
Well, look, I think the analysis is right. There is no real competition there. When you've got 6 big giants, no one's got any bargaining power. Government hardly has any bargaining power, so that's not a healthy system. The reason you want to privatize things is to create competition. If by privatizing something you haven't created competition, then there's no point privatizing it. So the choice is either nationalize, which I don't think is a good idea instinctively, or create proper competition, break them up, create as many more players into the system as you possibly can. But the status quo isn't enough. And the idea of, you had John Major talking about a windfall tax, fine, it make people feel better for a short period of time. It doesn't solve the problem. Price freeze, same thing. It doesn't address the problem. We need to look at the structure, the fact that you've got a tiny number of giant corporations holding the country over a barrel. That's the problem. And when even governments can't negotiate with these giant businesses, you've got a problem on your hands.
Right, more competition.
More competition. It is the same with the newspapers. You don't want one person, one man controlling half the press. You don't want 6 companies controlling the energy supply. You don't want banks that are too big to fail, that mantra that people kept on talking about, but we've still done nothing about it. We've got banks that are so big that if they screw up again, we're in trouble, not them. It's the old thing, if you owe the bank £1,000, you're in trouble. You owe them 10 billion or whatever the modern figure would be, they're in trouble. We are beholden to these giant corporations, and I think that is an issue. Being a conservative means being pro-market, not being pro-corporatism, and I think there is a really key distinction there. And unfortunately, the Conservative Party, as with the last Labour government, that the default position is always corporatism, always favouring the very large corporations, as opposed to genuine business, genuine markets, proper markets, competition, small business, and so on. That I think is the dividing line, and I wish more people in Parliament would recognise that that's where the line is.
How do you get this message across to the other side of the aisle? In other words, people who are reaching for more central planning, more of a socialistic response, and they criticize capitalism. But we're not seeing capitalism.
Well, that's
the
exactly
big 6 energy companies
exactly.
are not acting as free market capitalists, free marketeers. They're acting as a cartel. So how do you break through that to communicate to the other side that what they really want, if they want wages to go up, if they want jobs to go up, if they want standard of living to go up, they want more competition. They want more of what capitalism offers. How do you break through that message?
God, I wish I knew. I mean, I think that's exactly right. The trouble is, if you look at the current system and you regard it as capitalism, then you have to conclude that capitalism isn't working, and then you start reaching for the other isms, communism, socialism, whatever. But it's not capitalism for the reasons you've just described. And this is really where a proper conservative, a genuine conservative, I sort of feel I'm a minority in the party on some of these issues, and many of these issues, but a proper conservative should recognize what you're saying now. Absolutely. This should be our message, and I think it would resonate with people. At the moment, it looks like we're on the side of the big. We shouldn't be. We should be on the side of the market, small players, new entrants, competition, and so on. It's a very, very different thing. And it applies absolutely across the board in every single sector. And I think it also applies in politics. You break the structure of the party, you decentralize power, empower voters, empower communities. It's all about scale. Scale is the #1 defining issue of today, in my view.
Let's talk about an issue that actually you and I have talked about many times over the years, and that's the intersection between the ecology and the economy, and how these things interact. You are now, talking about what's happening, kind of to changing gears here for a second, with the elephant population, because the economy and the demand for tusks, et cetera, is wiping out this entire population. And it gets into what almost you could call it, I don't know if you've seen this quote by Paul Watson, who's the skipper of the Sea Shepherd.
Big fan of his.
He talks about the economics of extinction, that they're fishing the tuna, the huge bluefin tuna, to extinction, and they keep them in the freezer. And as they become extinct, the value of them goes up. So that seems like a complete, and it seems like the elephant is now the economics of extinction. They don't care if they wipe them out because those tusks, the value is going to go higher. Is this kind of talk?
Well, I'm told we had evidence in Parliament the other day from a Chinese lady who said that there are investment companies now who hoard rhino horns for exactly the same reasons. And there are people who suspect them for being behind some of the killings we've seen, because obviously wipe out the rhino in the wild, their stock is worth an absolute fortune. It is unbelievably perverse, but this is market failure. You have to recognize where the market can't deliver. You mentioned fishing. Well, if you've got boats with fishing lines that would stretch from London to Brighton, or nets that are twice the size of the O2 Arena, the Millennium Dome, those are not compatible with a sustainable future. You need to regulate. There's just simply no reconciling that with a future, with a sustainable future. So you need to have an intervention in the market where the market isn't working. Elephants are another example. We almost closed down the ivory industry in 1990 with an absolute ban on all sales. Elephant populations rose, even the ivory price went down. It just seemed to be working. Then they allowed one-off sales, a little bit here, a little bit there. China started becoming a major consumer, and suddenly, we're in a situation now where an elephant is killed every 15 minutes, where we are in a worse situation than we were in 1990. And that's what happens when you don't address market failure. That's what governments are there to do, in my view.
Right, market failure. Once again, you get back to the, Adam Smith and his observations during the Enlightenment are still true today, but they're not being applied today because you end up with these pockets of failure. Unfortunately, Zac Goldsmith, we are out of time. But before we go, just one more time for viewers out there. The campaign is called Recall. If you get 20,000 signatures, then it moves up and is considered. Where do people go to participate in this recall?
Government petitions, or look at my Twitter, and I know you've retweeted it as well. There's a link there to petitions, government petitions. It's campaign for a proper recall. It's got my name on it. It's unmistakable. I need as many people as possible to sign, and then I can take it into Parliament and hopefully make a difference.
All right, great. Zac Goldsmith, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Zac Goldsmith, a member of Parliament for Richmond Park. You can learn more about Zac at his website, zacgoldsmith.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.